The Heilpern Show. Sponsored by Step Finance, your go-to DeFi portfolio manager on Solana. Luno, if you're just getting into Bitcoin, it's the perfect place to start.
Things really are just starting to heat up.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Heilpern Show. This is sponsored by BlockFi. If you are interested in BlockFi and the interest rates that they offer, then I've left the description for you and the link for you in the description, in the comment section. I think right now they're probably offering some of the most competitive interest rates, given many companies are slashing. So I definitely recommend checking them out. So today we are going to be talking about all the hot stuff. We're talking about censorship, we're talking about the establishment, and we're talking about the general narrative towards crypto. And joining me for this discussion today is Frank Chaparro, the news director at The Block. Let's bring Frank in. Hey, Frank, how are you?
I'm good. I like your foliage in the background there.
What, this? You like this?
Yeah, very impressive.
Thank you. I made it myself.
You're welcome.
Actually, my mom
Nice.
helped me.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. So how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty tired. A lot of roaming around, a lot of crypto conferences. So I'm happy to be back in my house so I can get back into my routine. But it's been a lot of fun. I mean, the space is really energetic despite the sort of sideways price situation. I have never seen so much exuberance, happiness, people relaxing maybe after sort of, an arduous, couple of years. So it's been fun, and it's nice to kind of be a fly on the wall, so to speak, and get to cover a lot of these different conferences and events. And I've been doing at each one, I try to do at least one write-up to get a sense of exactly what's at the center of the discourse and conversation is. So it's fun. I'm doing pretty good.
Okay, so for those that don't know, you've just gotten back from the Bahamas where the FTX conference took place. And something which really struck me about that conference, now obviously I wasn't there, I haven't heard much feedback or seen much yet, but something which really struck me was the fact that Tony Blair, so for those that don't know, he was previously the Prime Minister of the Labour Party in the UK over like a decade ago. I think it was the early noughties probably. And then there was Bill Clinton.
We would say
so
90s.
Oh, no, we say noughties. Noughties is like
Yeah.
2000s.
Oh, that's early 2000s or all of the 2000s.
Noughties.
The 10s. Interesting.
Yeah, Americans never know what I mean when I say noughties, but it's the 2001, 2002, 2003.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, because it's not.
Got it.
Naughty.
Not because they were a naughty period of time.
It's probably a little bit of both. But what struck me really was the fact that Bill Clinton and Tony Blair were speakers. Now, I think most of the community were quite confused by that. So I'd like your take.
Well, I mean,
why do you think they were
part
speakers?
of it, definitely. So I think part of it has to do a little bit with FTX, and part of it has to do a little bit with SALT. If you know the history of SALT, and I got to get a bit of it from the man, the myth, the legend himself, Anthony Scaramucci. It kind of came out of the financial crisis. A lot of the sort of the sentiment out of Washington post financial crisis was very anti, flush with cash conference going among the titans of finance. So basically, pre-financial crisis, you'd had all these events, all of these like really fancy dinners around conferences and whatnot, and they wanted to put the sentiment was, don't do that, right? A lot of people lost a lot of money, and so the mooch kind of came in with SALT as a way to revitalize that scene, because at least from his perspective, you had a lot of hotels in places like Vegas that weren't getting the same action, the same traffic, so to speak, and so he started this as a way to revitalize that scene, but it's always been about bringing in outside speakers, not just from within Wall Street, but from the political realm, the regulatory realm, the business and technology realm, and have representatives speak on topics that may be peripheral or tangential to finance, but nonetheless relevant. So I think when you see any sort of politician at a SALT event, it's connected to that. I also think that when you think about the presence of more, maybe, I mean, obviously both were more relatively more liberal than other presidents and prime ministers. I think SBF, and he's talked about this, is rather keen to present a picture of the space that is very dynamic from a political perspective. I think some people outside of crypto think of it as very monolithic in nature, right? You have some of the louder voices like a Ted Cruz or a Cynthia Lummis kind of making the most headlines about being pro crypto. And then some of the people who make the most headlines of being anti crypto would be someone like Senator Elizabeth Warren out of Massachusetts. So if you have someone like a Bill Clinton and a Tony Blair at a crypto conference, it might give a signal to certain people in the political glitterati that it isn't just some sort of, or at least not all of it, right, isn't some sort of like libertarian anarchist community. It's very dynamic. It's very multifaceted. And we can get these different types of folks to come to our conferences and speak about leadership and maybe how crypto can do good for the world. And honestly, I think it's accurate of how the political breakdown is of crypto. It's not necessarily a right or left thing. When I think about what folks on the right like about crypto, it's kind of like, keeping the power of government small or minimizing it. But when I think about what the left might like about it, it's, banking the unbanked. It's providing better financial tools than the tools that exist for, folks more, in the lower rungs of the economic ladder, right? The left really should, and people have pontificated about this. Elizabeth Warren should really like crypto because it's effectively anti-bank. And what do liberal populists not like about the banks? They take advantage of the little guy, overdraft fees, etc. So I think that's how I would break it down. A bit of a bit of history, the historical sort of way SALT conferences are operated, and then this broader push among Sam to really evangelize for a more politically dynamic space. And
That's
he's doing a lot of work.
Diplomatic answer. It's a very diplomatic answer.
Well, I think some people, right? I mean, some people were kind of confused in as much as, is it trying to make crypto seem too leftist? I think that's one argument. I think another argument is that it might add an element of balance.
Yeah, I understand, and I think it is good to have individuals there who are from outside of the space and from many different, with many different diverse political beliefs. I just think that the problem, I mean, I can't really speak too much to Bill Clinton because, I'm not American, but the problem that I mainly find with Tony Blair is he is the biggest advocate for what are they called? Basically digital IDs. He's been pushing them since the Iraq War, which he started. So that's my biggest issue. He's sort of pushing digital IDs, CBDCs, the whole thing, vaccine passports, very much taking any global emergency to track and trace people. So I feel, for me personally, I felt like he's an enemy of everything that crypto stands for.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about him myself, aside from that movie, The Queen.
Right, okay.
That's the only.
I haven't
That's like
seen
my
it.
only. I think Helen Mirren starred in it, and she plays the Queen during Princess Diana's death, and that is probably. And there's there's a lot of tension between I forget the actor who played Tony Blair, but Tony Blair and the Queen, and that is the extent of my knowledge of his tenure as prime minister. So I kind of have to plead the fifth in that respect. But listen, I think you're going to find it on both sides. If you look at any person pounding the table, or at least becoming crypto curious, they're going to have an aspect of what they've said or what they believe in that does not necessarily jive with all of the tenets of decentralization or the cryptocurrency community. And I think that's okay, right? Like, I think the more people who can get in the room and engage with different community members is important. But at the same time, right, this wasn't necessarily a deeply, crypto conference, right? You had a bunch of financiers and investors, and so it's a draw to have someone who has held high office at one of these events, because then you can sort of like rub elbows with them. I saw Giselle, that was pretty cool.
Who's
Said
Giselle?
Tom Brady's wife.
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah,
I only know who
I
Tom Brady was in the last. I only found out who was in the last year. Not
see.
American.
There you go. I mean, that's proof is in the pudding that the crypto is empowering these folks as brands.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting. I mean, like, I have never. I mean, it's just first off, the scene there, like what they're
Right.
doing in the Bahamas, is just it seeing it up close and in person was far beyond what I could have imagined. Like, they're redefining this small country, and the prime minister obviously had a big presence at the conference, and all of the local, well, at least, I didn't speak to every single inhabitant of the island, over 400,000 people, but they're cool with it. They're like, really, like, this is really exciting, for our economy, and so many people are following in their footsteps. So you're going to have you could have dozens of companies in the crypto space based in Bahamas, and it mimics kind of the strategy of Francis Suarez in Miami, and other local leaders who want to attract this talent, this development, and this community, which is obviously affluent. But they're going to build an office space. They broke ground the week of Bahamas, crypto Bahamas, that can house like 1,000 people tied in some way to SBF, his charitable philanthropic efforts, the company, the different companies he runs, and then some of the investments and portfolio companies that he touches, all there. And so many of them are already there. And it's really it's almost kind of bizarre in some ways, because it just happened overnight. But that's the FTX story. The whole story is an overnight story. And you never know what shoe's going to drop. Nothing is ever predictable, but it's pretty insane. And they're not the only ones, right? I think there's this shift, this tide that's shifted when I think about the various places I've gone over the past few weeks, even in Paris, right? Macron gave an interview with this a journalist friend of mine about crypto, and they're super keen to bring in some of the innovation from London. This is almost like the 100 Years' War reimagined, but in terms of crypto, right? France versus the UK, and they're battling it out, but instead of in ships, they're doing it with different companies to incentivize them to be there. And then even in DC, there's been this like awakening to the, I used to go to DC, and not that I'm that important, but I mean, people now know like what the block is, which is pretty interesting. Gary Gensler looks at our dashboard, but I was hobnobbing with different DC types while I was there. I wasn't invited to the White House correspondent dinner, but maybe next year. And these people, like, they're all getting into crypto, and the policy folks. It's really interesting how much of a force it's become, because all of these companies now are starting to hire policy and government relations folks to advocate on their behalf. I was talking with Kristen Smith at the Blockchain Association. The amount of money from a lobbying or from a sort of individual donor perspective went from zero to has effectively now amounts to the tens of millions. And so everywhere it's like it's become this like force of nature, which is really not necessarily captured in the mainstream press. I talk about this a lot. Crypto, more broadly in the sort of the zeitgeist of media, is still defined or stuck within the parameters of very specific and old narratives that have been commonplace for several years. One of which that I see time and time again. I saw it this morning in a story in the Wall Street Journal. The SEC is hiring 20 new staff or to sort of monitor or do something with crypto. And in the I don't know if it was the lead per se or in the meta, will bring the unregulated market into the purview of U.S. regulators. And it's like, how does this perception, and this isn't just the journal, I mean, I see it all the time. How is this perception that crypto is unregulated? Like still, like, how can you factually say that? Like, how is that a fact when New York Department of Financial Services oversees most of the crypto exchanges here in the U.S. Coinbase has to answer to their authority. You have a firm like Genesis Global, which is a registered broker-dealer. Sure, I guess you can say none of the exchanges are federally regulated exchanges, but that's not the same as being unregulated, right? I mean, these firms, many of them are regulated in some degree or another.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
like one narrative and like one misconception, which is like
I'm gonna just jump in there
yeah,
though, because
sure.
there are a lot of narratives, and we can go through them. One thing I just want to quickly refer to is when you spoke about London and Paris, and even DC with more people and more countries coming into the space. I still sort of stand by the idea that they're not coming in a good way. They're coming in terms of, oh, I see blockchain technology, I see it as a form of surveillance through CBDCs. So when we see that kind of adoption, I think that's the sort of adoption from these major places. I mean, you mentioned Macron. Macron was pushing vaccine passports terribly. I mean, in his own words, he wanted to make the lives of unvaccinated people very, very difficult. I mean, he said he wanted to piss them off, and I literally quote. So I feel like these are people who don't have good and fair intentions when it comes to individual liberties and freedoms. So they're coming into this space for sure, but I think that they'll use the technology in a bad way.
I think honestly, I mean, I'm sure there's a bit of that, like, certain folks have a different view of surveillance, and so maybe they do see blockchain as a way to, incorporate, effectively have more power over the folks to whom they're supposed to lead or govern. But I think it more so boils down to jobs, right? Like you don't want to be the person that's chasing jobs away. And even if it's, the secondary or tertiary reason for wanting to incentivize people to operate and do business in your country, I think it's a powerful one. Like if you look at the amount of employees that many of these companies employ, it's not in the hundreds anymore. It's not in the thousands. It's in the tens of thousands and the hundreds of thousands. Maybe not hundreds of thousands, but certainly quite a number of people. Like we've even grown at the block from, a year ago, 30 people to over 150. And I'm sure that we would, explore different jurisdictions that, where there's a vibrant sort of, and even if it's not like a financial incentive, just like knowing that they've got your back and that they're keen to work with you and support you, which is something I think that Mayor Suarez has done a good job of doing. The actual like implementation of crypto is kind of ambiguous. Like, yeah, there's maybe a Miami coin thing, or you're gonna maybe try to do taxes. It's like, but that's like all right, like, and then to your point, like, sure, maybe they're like, all right, we want to figure out how we can do CBDCs, But I think at the end of the day, they want to go back to their constituents and be like, hey, we got this company that wants to hire 1,000 people to either not leave or set up shop here and then employ people within our jurisdiction. And then that translates into downstream economic impacts, restaurants, drivers, and the like. So I think that's like, I mean, look, like, let's be honest, like, why does Ted Cruz like care about this space so much? Because you've got ExxonMobil looking to see, and different gas companies looking to get into crypto mining. And he sees all of these miners coming to Texas and like, those are, who's going to butter his bread? But that's also good because then, that to a degree, the more that, the sort of power of the individuals operating the space is recognized by people in power. It has a trickle down effect, or at least puts a stamp of legitimacy onto a lot of the work of what we're doing here.
So let's go into journalism. You were sort of touching on that earlier. I think that there's definitely these really bizarre narratives that keep popping up. Just a few weeks ago, there was a crazy headline which was calling Bitcoiners psychopaths, saying that they are financially illiterate. And then we have the whole Bitcoin mining is going to destroy the environment. So my question to you is, do you think that they genuinely believe the rubbish that they say? You come from the traditional journalism world, so you tell me.
Yeah, when I was at NPR affiliate, we used to talk about if it bleeds, it leads. So that's sort of true, and I guess to a degree in financial journalism. But listen, I think it's like everybody operates within the confines of their own view of the world, right? So if you kind of think of crypto as unregulated or mainly useful for criminals, and you don't really know, like, the back office accountant who works at Gemini or Coinbase, like, you don't know that it's normal people who, also take their kids to, daycare and drive around in like, BMWs in your nice neighborhood, then you probably don't think that they're normal people. You think they're all like shadowy, like psychopaths maybe. But so I don't think that's the case with all journalists. I think that's broadly, people who aren't in crypto would think about it or not think about it. So let's say you get like data from Chainalysis that shows that the amount of illicit activity has increased to, I don't remember the exact number, but let's say it was like 1.5 billion, and it increased or doubled from the year before. You look at that and you think, okay, I understand that there's this like broader, there's all these hacks and crypto was used in the dark web because those were the prevailing stories. So, okay, so it's increasing. So the story is that it's increasing. And since that's the confined or the parameters in which you're thinking, it's just building on the blocks that you have, no pun intended. Whereas if you've been in the space long enough and you see it has gone from fairly sophomoric in nature to now, the exchanges have done their SOC 1s and SOC 2s, and they've hired all these people from Wall Street and all these developers from Google. And you see the amount of action happening on regulated platforms, and you see the headline number as a percentage going down from, I think it was 2% to a half of a percent, then that sticks out to you. So for me, I'd say, okay, look, illicit activity is going down, which makes sense because the crypto market's maturing. But if you don't have that background, then the sort of former story, as I outlined, is easier to sort of like put together in your mind. And I think that's the case with a lot of different these are really sticky narratives. The ESG one as another example. And then more recently, the sanctions narrative as well, right? Like, I think it was such a hard thing to sort of explain because most people don't understand. I don't understand, OFAC sanctions as well as, some very serious policy people or geopolitical experts. But a lot of people don't understand that, and they don't understand crypto. So when you kind of mix the two together and there's already this underpinning narrative that none of the crypto exchanges like are regulated at all, it built this like powerful, like really powerful message that all crypto exchanges are breaking sanctions, which obviously wasn't the case, right? Because sanctions were not at the time, you have to do no business with Russians. It was specific characters, specific oligarchs. But when you think that crypto exchanges are already unregulated, you just assume, or you can assume, that then they are dealing with these types of actors, because why wouldn't they be? They're unregulated, and these Wild West venues of people who are faceless and nameless. So I think it's just a degree of like unfamiliarity with the degree to which the space has matured, and an unfamiliarity with like who are the main actors and people. And that translates into stories that are somewhat out of touch, I think, with where the market is. I think we've been lucky enough to have, we grew up in this bear market, the firm, and have stuck by it. We have very low retention, and we got to see these builders kind of come back out of the ashes. And so there's a bit of context that adds. Whereas at other outfits, you had the 2017 run up, and then as you saw the drawdown, most media outlets had their crypto journalists sort of like leave or move on to other beats. And then now you have a new wave of folks, I would say, who are just starting to get acclimated, and you want to tell tough stories. You want to make a name for yourself as a journalist. And that's what I tried to do. When I started at the block, we told a lot of tough stories about, basis unwinding, and, the blockchain terminal scam, and Bitfinex's banking hiccups, and the breakdown of Noble Bank. I was actually, or Deltek's relationship with Bitfinex. I saw that guy in Bahamas, and he was like, "You made my life hell, but it's all cool." And so, you want to do that. You want to come out and tell really good stories. But I think like there is this gap between like the maturity level, or the sort of like reputability of most crypto businesses, and the perception of their reputability and maturity. And there's mistakes. I mean, like, OpenSea is a pretty good example. Like I think at the last fall were 7 people, and now they're worth $13.3 billion in valuation. So, when you grow that fast, you're going to make mistakes, and it's fine to point out those mistakes, but I think there's a difference between reporting, being tough and sort of holding power to account, and there's a difference between that and coming to the space from a basis that the entire thing is without merit. And I think that when you come at it from that, you're telling pretty boring stories. If you come at it with a degree of curiosity and a degree of skepticism, Max, with a degree of respect, I think you're going to get really great stories, and ask really good questions, because the people are interesting. Like, I mean, it's unbelievable. Some of the founders that have come out of the bear market and what they're doing. I mean, at least from my perspective, and I would beseech, journalists out there in the mainstream to look at those stories, because it's pretty crazy.
I think what's fascinating, I'm fascinated by your sympathy for the stories, and the reason why I say that is because from what I gathered from what you said, it sounds really just like they just don't know. And my problem with that is, so go educate yourself before you write a story. I mean, I used to work for Chinese Global TV Network as a correspondent. I was based in Paris, and God forbid I started to write a story which I did not fully know about. Oh my God. I was told to call every expert I knew about whatever I was covering. Say I was covering trade wars, right? I was actually covering a story between Macron and Xi Jinping, the trade situation, and I was under strict instructions to know the story inside out, because you're a journalist. That is why journalists hold themselves to such high degrees. That's why, you know, journalism used to be, you know, the God's truth. It used to be the ultimate thing that everybody sort of really respected, and, you know, people really held journalists to account. Nowadays, for many different reasons, journalism has lost its value and its credibility. So I'm sad that if this is the case, well, I think it's sad for two reasons. Number one, if it's done on purpose, that's sad. Number two, if it's done out of just a lack of understanding about crypto, therefore a lack of sort of education, that's even more sad. You know, there's so much information out there with regards to the whole ESG narrative. I mean, even calling Bitcoiners illiterate and psychopaths. Come on, that's not laziness. That's pure hatred. What do you think?
So Nick Carter changed his Twitter bio to illiterate financial psychopath, and I didn't have the context for that, so maybe I'm not doing my job. But I thought, did someone call you that? And he was like, no, there was some article that said. I mean, listen, I don't know. I honestly, I wouldn't be. I'd like to see the data on the on how the average Bitcoin person is more illiterate than the average non-Bitcoin person.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Could be true. I mean,
there's no data.
I don't know. There's a lot of questionable people everywhere. But what I think it is listen, like it's a red hot. It has captured the mind share of the entire world, right? I mean, Katy Perry was at this conference in the Bahamas. So, and Paris Hilton is very active. I heard from someone down there that she was doing due diligence on a crypto fund that I know. So it's captured the attention of the mainstream, Jimmy Kimmel. So news outlets are really trying hard to put as much resources into this as possible, and putting fairly green reporters onto the scene. And, you know, I do think, you know, they're doing the best that they can. And I think we are too. Like, everybody makes mistakes and gets things wrong. But I had an editor who used to say, there before the grace of God go I, whenever there'd be a funny mishap that would happen at a rival. So do I think it's, you know, I don't know. I understand. I do think some of it gets under my skin too. And I'll see certain things. I'm like, this is just like, come on, just talk to people. Just talk to anybody. Like, talk to literally, and they'll talk to you. That's the other thing. Like, they're so much more open than any bank or any sort of, you know, large insurance or technology company. Like, and from my perspective, they're also really open to talk about how they've messed up and what they need to do better. Just do that. But my grandmother used.
Why?
Yeah, I think that because there's so many stories, and maybe they're under a degree of pressure. Maybe these narratives that I talked about earlier are so pervasive that, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, some of it isn't like, it's all about perception, right? Like, it's not inaccurate to say that something is X. Like, it's not inaccurate to say that the amount of like illicit transactions is going up, even though as a percentage it's going down. It's just like the way you look at it. And
it's a huge misrepresentation.
It can be, but I think that it's not, it's a misrepresentation when you have the context. But the thing that I would say, and maybe it's naive, maybe I'm a naive person, but I would say, you know, don't attribute malice what you can to well, the actual quote is stupidity, but I would say unawareness.
You're forgiving, Frank. You're very forgiving.
Very very. People say I'm nice. I think I'm pretty nice.
You're very
but listen, it is annoying sometimes. I mean, like, because it's like, you know, people work hard, and I understand that it's like, what do we, well, you know, we're all trying to do something here. We all think, for me, it's about the you know, it's about a lot of it just has to do with the people. I'm like, just talk to these folks, and they all have their own interesting stories of how they got here, and they have good intentions. So when I see like, certain sort of like, especially like mainstream tech reporters, just like there's like a salt that underpins a lot of them. And I think it's because maybe they covered like the crisis or they covered the tech boom, and they think, well, geez, like what is the to be sure? What is the catch? Which is part of their job. So they zero in on the what's the catch. I would offer advice my advice to them would be, that's fine. Like, laser in on the bullshit, but like there's a lot of interesting, you know, stuff that's happening. I mean, depending on which vertical you're coming in from, to report on and highlight. But yeah, to my favorite thing I've been saying recently is, it is what it is.
Oh no, I
The
hate that
I just
saying.
love it. Yeah, one of our editors hates it. He says every time you say it, I just want like ooze to fall down from the ceiling on you, and just.
Yeah, serves
But
him right.
you're a very passionate person, so I'm not.
Who,
I'm
me?
fairly passionate, but yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yes, overly.
I'm just trying to, you know,
All right,
find
I
good
hear you.
stories. Yeah, but yeah, but listen, I sympathize with. It is annoying. It's definitely true.
Yeah. I mean, we don't need to go over it, but I'd use a different word than annoying. I'd say it's more sinister than annoying. But anyway, well, let's keep going. I'm interested to know what the differences are between working in the traditional media versus working in crypto. Um, do you feel you can be more political as an individual? Do you feel you have more freedom to say certain things? What would you say some of the main differences are?
Well, I think that like one of the main differences is we can get really granular on a topic. I remember trying to pitch different stories at my previous shop, and it was kind of you kind of had to fit things into, um like a more general audience, make it appealing to, many different types of people, not just like a crypto specific audience. So that's one benefit, right? Like you can kind of like write about really pedantic, wonky things. And I
Mhm.
think that's just like the DNA of our company is, we're not trying to, you know, try to get as many clicks as possible. Like, and that's like a broader media problem. So you can kind of spend the time to do, deep dives into, what I like is market structure. And that's because we have a fairly, robust business on the research side, similar to like, maybe like the relationship between a Bloomberg News and Bloomberg Intelligence, or the actual financial services company. So that gives you a bit more bandwidth than if you were a BuzzFeed, which is solely relying on clicks.
Clicks. Yeah.
And it's a bad spot to be in. Like I don't envy having to, um, optimize for that. And we have done like, we're still in the early innings of trying to figure out, how to, not optimize from not to be clickbaity, but to even think about like how can we get this in front of as many people as possible. And it's a fairly robust business. Um, so I guess that kind of is two different things there. The first is we can get really deep. We don't have to worry about like, you know, we all have our own audiences within the firm. And sometimes we want to write for a really niche audience, and that's fine if only like a couple hundred people read it because they're going to get it through the subscription product.
Mhm.
And if we want to do something that that's a little more like, um, mainstream, like I did this fun piece on why, Larry David did the FTX, Super Bowl ad. And I talked to the director of it and to the folks at FTX. And that was more like, that was like a very like almost Business Insider-y like article. And we can do that too. So I guess that's the main difference is you kind of can really laser in on a niche audience. You can cover things that are more mainstream. And you have the freedom to do it. And we're, at least here, we're not really, we're not handcuffed by the overwhelming power of the click.
Right. I understand. The
Not
reason I
everybody has that
asked,
luxury because Facebook and Google completely took all the ad market share.
well, the reason I ask is because a couple of weeks ago, I thought it was quite interesting. You tweeted, "We sacrificed the edification and development of our youngest Americans over the last few
Oh,
years
yeah.
to make our oldest feel more safe."
I think I could
Millions
say,
of students, let me finish. Millions of students are chronically absent from school. Such a shame what's going on in America right now.
wow, you really
I liked it. I liked it. I really liked it. It's a good tweet.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, I think that I don't know what would happen. I don't think I tweeted stuff like that in previous roles. I think a lot of my colleagues at the firm probably looked at that and thought, "Oh, geez, Frank, But I think it's true. Like, you talk to regular people, and they're like, they want their kids to go back to school, and it's like, what are we doing at what cost? Everything has a cost, and I think that sometimes we don't evaluate those costs properly. But yeah, I think that sometimes we have a very open spirit at the firm, all different walks of life, all different stripes and colors, and we all express ourselves.
It's good.
And as long as we're respectful, I mean, there are people on the team that are, right on the other side, and it's honestly really unique. Not to be too shilly, but I don't know if there's many places like that where you can have people tweet stuff like that and then tweet things that are antithetical to it, and then like really like get to work at 8, 9, and then just like really champion for each other. But yeah, I think like it's a good thing to for some of my colleagues to like eye roll at a tweet like that, and then when they do something similar, I eye roll at it as well, and then maybe we talk about it, maybe we don't, but we like get the job done and really respect the actual craft of what we're doing.
So here's the thing.
Yeah, that was really spicy. I think after that one, I probably
you should do that more often. I like it. I want to see more of that kind of Frank. It's good. I think that you see the fact that you can get on and still enjoy the work that you do together, I actually think is unique to crypto, because you ask what's going on in America right now, and I think it's not just America, it's globally. It's that people are now identifying themselves by their political beliefs. So I actually I'm a journalist by trade, and I'm a
journalist. I don't have any political beliefs at all.
Okay, sure, for sure. So I'm a journalist by trade. I used to work as a journalist, and there was this one thing that happened that I'll never forget. So I'll share it with you. I was working in the newsroom on a Sunday, and on a Sunday, there's only a few people in there. It's very intimate. It's quite cozy. And it's just generally not super professional. I was working in London, and I was based in Kensington, and right around the corner from where our news office was, in Kensington, the sexiest actor lives right around the corner, Henry Cavill. Right, he played Superman. He lives right around the corner, and so the women in the office, he's great. So the women in the office used to say, "Oh, he lives around the corner. I once bumped into him when I was getting a coffee," and so I was like, I don't know what I said, but I was just like, "Oh, I love Henry Cavill," and one of my colleagues turned around to me and was just like, "Ugh, I hate him," and I was like, and she's a serious feminist, so I said, "Oh, why?" Because of his comments about the Me Too campaign, and she said, yeah, he's horrible. He's this, he's that. And like this woman went off on me in the office, because he said some comments about the Me Too campaign. I was like, well, I like him. I don't really care. And she went off on me in the office, and it was so unprofessional, so inappropriate, and it was just truly incredible. It was just like a feminist going absolutely nuts, because I thought Henry Cavill was quite hot, and that is like the epitome, I think, of the workspace at the moment, particularly in journalism, because you do have a lot of activists masquerading as journalists. So I think that, and being able to sort of put your opinions aside and get on and work, is unique to crypto.
Yeah. Well, I think, going back to the top of the conversation, it's not something that, someone like SBF is trying to meme into existence. I do think that the makeup of the space is rather wide ranging. And I hope that, there's some elements. I mean, some of it is pretty grotesque, like the things that people say. I mean, but this has always been the case with the internet. But even in crypto, like people do not hold back behind their anonymous avatars when sort of engaging with people, and so it can be intimidating. But at the same time, I think when you actually like get into the DMs of these folks, or you meet them in person, you can really, I think most are fairly reasonable. But at least from my experience, I mean, at the block, like just very open-minded, speak your mind, and without fear of reprisal from you. It is what it is.
Is what it is. It is what it is. And
it is what it is. But it's it's
you know what happens, Frank, though, when it is what it is? People say it is what it is, and then they vote with their feet. So I've left London. I've left that liberal,
you're in
crazy. Florida. Yeah, of course. Because it is what it is. I go where it is. I don't like what it was. I like what it is.
What do you think of Florida?
I love it very much. I think it's amazing.
Wait till you get the humidity in June, though. Have you been there?
No, but I can feel the humidity. It's pretty nuts, but it is what it is, Frank. At least I'm not surrounded by crazy lefties.
Bahamas is not humid at all, which was
okay. Maybe I should just move there instead.
That was actually the biggest surprise. The biggest takeaway from the Bahamas was that it's kind of, I guess, like if you look at it from like a geographical perspective, kind of like in line with North Carolina or South Carolina in the States. So those are very humid places. But I guess because you have to talk to a geologist or meteorologist, I don't know who, but I assume because it's in the middle of the ocean, it's just so breezy and like insanely pleasant.
Good.
Like one of the least humid places I've ever been to. So this episode was sponsored by the Bahamas. No, I'm just kidding. I was just joking.
No.
But definitely go. It was really nice.
I will do. I have another story I just need your take on. I want to ask you about Elon Musk versus Jeff Bezos. And the media's reaction to that. So Elon Musk wants to buy Twitter, and it's the end of the world. The right is taking over. Not that he's even particularly right-wing on anything. We wouldn't really know because he's not really said his political opinions yet. But when Jeff Bezos wants to buy the Washington Post, that is a beautiful cultural shift that is changing America, and we should all be very interested.
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Or an interesting my Uber driver on the way was actually South African.
Right.
The one who dropped me off just from the airport an hour and a half ago. And he asked me about what I thought. And it's interesting. I think that there is this desire, right? Like you don't want misinformation out there, but you kind of have to, there's a balance between restricting speech and trying to control misinformation. And it's very difficult. And I spoke with this guy who was an early advisor to Facebook a few weeks ago, right after when the Musk thing came out. And I did not think that it would get this far. It's funny internally. We're like, should we prepare a story about like what this means for crypto? I was like, I don't think this is going to happen, right? Like this
Right.
isn't going to actually transpire. But anyway, so be that as it may, I still hopped on the phone with this person,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to pull up my notes, but we talked about like this, like the difficulty around like trying to ensure that like you have like a forum, a place where people can like express themselves and also like clamp down on like actual misinformation, harmful information that can hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy. I think that certain people might view like everyone's knee jerk, everyone sees things hit the wire and they like, even, with Elon, like people thought, oh, he's going to completely open it up to the most insane strains of society and people, it's going to be like Lord of the Flies and people will be able to do whatever they want.
Mm.
I think some other people look at that and think, okay, like, finally there's going to be, there's going to be, it's going to be maybe decentralized to a degree, or there's going to be, a clamp down on the bots, and it's not going to necessarily be held to the whim of the public zeitgeist or the ever shifting public opinion, which is good, because you can kind of focus on what makes a user experience good, and yeah, I don't know. Twitter has its problems. I think that it remains to be seen what Elon will do with it, but I certainly don't think that I mean, like Twitter's like needs some work.
Mm.
So it's a good story. It's an interesting story. I
Mm.
think that the left has somehow become a bit like there's like almost like the word censorship, like it's like scary to a degree because there are, I think, scary people who would like to not be censored. So it's like
Right.
how do you balance that, like from their perspective, and that resonates with me, like I understand, but um I think like just it is what it is. No, it's not just it is what it is, but I think we'll see what he can do. I'm very excited about like the potential crypto elements that he could add
Mm.
to the site, to the experience.
What kind of crypto elements do you think he's going to add? Dogecoin for tipping.
Yeah, I think that'd be pretty cool. I
Yeah.
mean, that people lose their mind. I mean, they just I honestly don't like, people really hate him,
Mm.
right? Like I don't understand that. I think he's like really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's
It
a
is going
really
to be
interesting.
interesting. It is going to be interesting. I think that it's sad and bizarre and weird that we have to put our faith in a centralized individual in order to maintain.
Well, it's like, but it doesn't work. People have tried to do these decentralized crypto social media,
Come
and
back
they
into
just
the frame more. I can't see you, by the way.
sorry, they just
Thank you.
suck. That's the thing. Like that's the
We're
problem.
early, Frank. We're still early.
Yeah, I don't. It's tough. It's like, all right, someone go build it then, because
Oh, yeah, we're trying.
I don't know.
But I agree. I agree with the takeover. I think that this is the best that we have because the decentralized versions don't work. So I'm with you on that. I think that so far it seems that he is somebody who is going to protect freedom of speech. And I think, to be honest, like he put it really nicely. He sort of said that Twitter has become this town hall of public discussion, and it's true. It's become this global consciousness, and I think to be removed from it is a kind of violation of, I think it's, I don't know, I'd go as far as to say it's like a violation. It's violation of a right, a violation of freedom of speech, because I often say that, like, you can scream from your balcony, right, and say I don't agree with what the government's doing. I can scream from my streets and the rooftops, but if nobody can hear you, and if you don't have an audience, then you don't actually have freedom of speech. you need access to people, otherwise there is no freedom of speech. It's like if a tree falls in the woods and nobody sees it, did it even fall, right? So I think that I hope that he is going to allow more freedom of speech, and sort of take us down this new path where censorship is less, or even non-existent. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff on Twitter. So
you know that there's hardcore porn on Twitter. Did you know that?
I've never seen it.
Yeah, hardcore porn. And I know this because I don't actually know who, but somebody I followed must have liked something and it came up on my page. Yeah, it's hardcore porn on Twitter. But you're not allowed to sort of like maybe misgender somebody by accident. And that basically removes you from the public body.
There's an old joke that Ronald Reagan told when he was president. I don't know what made me think of this, but it's funny. So I'm going to share it with your audience. And it's an American and a Russian arguing about which one of their countries is better. And the American says, I can go right into the White House. I can go right into the Oval Office and pound on the president's desk and say, Mr. President, I don't like the way you're running your country. And the Russian says, I can do that. The American says, you can? He goes, sure. I can go right into the Kremlin. I can run right up to the premier's desk. I can slam in his desk and say, Mr. Premier, I don't like the way Ronald Reagan's running his country.
Oh, man. I don't think you can do that. Wasn't that what Jan 6 was all about?
He had a lot of good jokes.
Who, Reagan?
Yeah, he did.
I liked him.
Yeah, he used to keep them on like postcards, physical postcards, front to back, index cards, not postcards. And just tell him that was like his thing.
Sign of the times.
Yeah. Reminding me of my great aunt. Yeah, but we'll see. I hope that it's good, because I think Twitter is like where we all are. You know,
it's a global consciousness. It just is. And if you're cut off from it, then that's a violation of freedom of speech, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's also a private company. So it's like, you know, they can deem who is within this forum and not, right? Because they have their own freedoms. I mean,
we have laws about
just like anything else.
Yeah, I mean, we have laws about like, you know, discrimination laws and like equal pay laws and things like that. You know, you could say it's a private company, they could decide how they want to pay.
There's a fine line, right? Like if I run a bar, like there's a fine line. Like what I think of someone being an asshole is probably different from what maybe a different bar manager thinks of someone being an asshole.
Freedom of speech.
Yeah,
should just be upheld.
I don't know, like what, like, but if it's your like house or bar or whatever company, you know, you can kind of set the parameters around. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
No, I agree with you though.
What is allowed in this forum or within this place.
Which is why, you know, we know that freedom of speech is better. And so I hope that, you know, Elon Musk upholds it. And I'm just fascinated about the way the media has covered it. And I'm interested to watch how the media continues to change and shift and present things in different ways. And we'll always be skeptical of what I read.
You should get him on the show.
Elon Musk? Oh, I will do eventually. I think you
we'll
do it in person.
You have great people on the show.
Me? Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you included. It was great chatting to you, Frank.
Anytime. Listen, long-time listener, first-time caller.
I love it. That's great.
Thank you so much.
Would you have any final thoughts? Where can people start following you? How can people keep up with your work and what's going on at the block?
Yeah, I mean, I have a show as well. Probably not as well listened to as yours, but it's the Scoop podcast, and I am at the Twitter for now. Who knows? I could get blocked by Elon. Let's see. Who knows what he's going to do?
I doubt it. You'll be all right, Frank.
At FinTech Frank. I loved all the tweets about like people going back and saying, I got to delete all my anti-Elon tweets. But that's the thing. It goes back to your point. At the end of the day, and this would be my closing thought,
Yeah.
no matter where you sit, when you are entrusting any company or person or centralized entity, whether you're on the right side of it or the left side of it, you're at the whim of the discretion of that person. And so who knows who could have came in and bought Twitter? Could have been any sort of, well, really hard to construct a deal like that, but could have been someone who maybe didn't agree with you and you'd be cast out, or someone who does and then they cast out the other side. You really, that's what you're, that's the sort of social contract that exists there. But we shall see.
We shall see. It is what it is. And when you say it is what it is, that leads to serious consequences. People will start voting with their feet. There'll always be reactions to every action has a consequence. And I think we're at a pivotal moment in time. So I'm excited to see how it all goes. Frank, it was so great having you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Absolute pleasure. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to follow Frank. And if you are watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button and the like button so you never miss a video. We'll see you next week.